Hello, everyone. It's Steve with Aptera Owners Club. A day or two ago, this was an article that showed up on Cleantechnica. Aptera, Archimoto, and Solar are sliding into the abyss, and tech writers should know better. It was an article written mostly about Aptera, but kind of talking about the problems with tech writers gushing over these things. And if you can get past kind of the snarky, smug, and dismissive tone of the writing, there's a few decent points made, and I thought we would go over them. All right, so before I go over this, I wanted to read to you guys one of my favorite quotes, and it comes from a speech that Teddy Roosevelt gave at the Sorbonne in 1910 called Citizenship in the Republic, but it's more popularly known by the name The Man in the Arena for the part of the speech which is the most widely known. And it's one of my favorite quotes. And it says, "It is not the critic who counts, but not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, who does eventually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." So I think it's very easy to sit back and play armchair quarterback and criticize others. Um, but it's hard to actually do the thing. And even if you try to do the thing and you fail, I think those people should be lauded. And anyway, that is the spirit with which I read many of these articles. So anyway, here's the article. So this is a kind of a screed about how uh, he thinks that the current um, writing about Aptera and other ideas is just effusive and not very critical, which in many ways I agree with. All right, so he thinks that you should write. He believes that Aptera is going to fail for sure, and so why are you wasting time on it? That's his thing, and that's just his opinion. And to be, to be perfectly frank, most startups do fail. 90% of startups fail. And we know that the only successful US car company in the past like 2 decades, I mean 2 centuries, um, is Aptera. I mean, not Aptera, is Tesla. So by just statistics and just playing the odds, Aptera is going to fail, and so is most other startups. So, but people write things not uh, because they want to know whether it's going to fail or not. People write things because they find the ideas interesting and worth discussing. So that's what but he thinks that, you should just write about it once and be done with it. And that's his opinion. And then be clear about conflicts of interest. I think he's under the opinion that people who talk about Aptera and write about Aptera have some kind of deep fiscal interest in it, and that they're not talking about it. Basically, I don't think very many people who write about Aptera have a vested interest in it. Maybe some of them are investors. Like, I've always been very clear that I'm an investor, but I'm a very small time investor. The amount of money that I've invested in Aptera is inconsequential to me. I think of it more as a donation, and because I believe in the idea and I believe in wanting efficient transportation, I want to support it. So I've given them an amount that I can afford to lose, and if I lose it, it's not a big deal. And unless Aptera goes up like 10,000 fold, it's going to make zero impact in my life. If it goes up tenfold, which would be amazing, it's not really going to change my life. It's not going to. It's the amount of money I invested in it is not something that's going to change anything about my lifestyle or what I'm able to do. So I think most of these writers, they're not these writers that write about it are not wealthy enough to have invested enough money in Aptera that what Aptera does is going to make any difference in their life. So this is an imagined conflict of it's an imagined problem that he has. He thinks that that's why people are writing about it, and it's not. People are writing about it because it's interesting. Check the histories of the founders. This is where he talks about how he thinks that Fambro and Anthony, he fails to spell Fambro's name correctly, and there's a lot of uh, factual errors. Like he believes Aptera went bankrupt, and he believes it's the same company. Now, that's a very common misconception. That's why I made this video, a brief history of Aptera, and he should probably go watch it so he can educate himself about the real history of Aptera. I won't go too much into it, but number one, they didn't go bankrupt, they liquidated. Number two, they weren't the ones that drove it into the ground. Basically, Paul Wilbur made some decisions about trying to convert to a four-wheeled vehicle at the end, and they ran out of money, and they chased the ATVM loans, which they did not get, and they ran out of capital, and they went under. And he's talking about how they have no relevant experience in building these things, other than Chris Anthony did build some boats for a while. But by that metric, you could go look at Neil Saki. He was the guy that started Zero Motorcycles. Before he made Zero Motorcycles, he was just doing engineering consulting. He had no experience whatsoever in manufacturing um, or designing electric motorcycles before this. And you know what? He succeeded. Zero Motorcycles still around today. Also, if you look at Elon Musk before he started Tesla, what was his experience? His experience was he started X.com, which eventually became PayPal. He was booted from the company. Peter Thiel um, basically ran it for a few years and then made it successful enough that eBay bought it, of which Elon Musk got about $200 million from it. So that was his entire background, was in online payments. So he had zero experience making and manufacturing any vehicles of any kind. By his metric, Elon Musk, Neil Saki, they should have no business getting into this manufacturing vehicles business. So I don't know that that's a relevant thing. I mean, no one has any experience or success until they do it for the first time. Now, admittedly, like we said, 90% of startups do fail. So if you're going to bet, being a cynic, you're going to be right 90% of the time. All right. So provide basic data and history for the firm. And this is true. Yeah. If you're going to write about it, you should give basic information. And this is true. I mean, this is factual information. The first iteration of Aptera, they ran through $30 million before they ran out of money. This time they've raised $85 million, and they are basically probably burning the money through their expenses about as fast as they can raise it, and they need $50 million to reach production. And that's going to be a hard lift. It's going to be difficult. That is extremely hard. Now, 18 years to deliver nothing, go through bankruptcy, and burn through at least $150 million of other people's money. That again is not true. He needs to kind of figure that out. They worked for a few years, then they were not working. And it's a totally different company with different leadership. Now, the leadership back then was Paul Wilbur, and Steve Ambrose and Chris Anthony were not leading the company back then. And there were decisions made about moving away from the three-wheel vehicle and the original vision of the company, and they ran out of money. They did not go bankrupt. They liquidated, which means they paid back some of their creditors, and all the money of the depositors of the pre-orders were returned to them. I was one of those, and I got my deposit back. Um, and this is, again, not a lot of money to go through. Most startup vehicle companies go through way more money than this before they make it to production. And we had videos about it before, like Lucid and Rivian went through several $billion before they reached production. So $85 million is basically nothing compared to that. And then he contradicts himself later on in the article and talks about it. Assess the history of the product. This is where he goes on a screed about how three-wheeled vehicles are dumb, and those never succeed. But I mean, that's not true. Like one of the most successful three-wheeled vehicles in the world are three-wheeled vehicles. Like if you've gone anywhere in the world that's not a first world country, these tuk-tuks are everywhere. You go to Honduras. I've been to Honduras. I've been to Indonesia. I've been to several other Asian countries in Latin America. They're all over the place. They're very successful. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with three-wheeled vehicles. They're very stable. People just aren't used to them, and you know they're not going to be successful until they are. And so it's a new thing, and obviously, guy doesn't like new things. That's fine. Assess the capital requirements for the product. Now, this is true. Now, this is where he kind of contradicts himself, talking about how much money they ran through here, 85 million, and then he says, "Oh, they haven't used up enough money." And he's thinking that they're going to need more money, and that is true. They are going to need a lot more money. And I actually agree with him. I don't know that $50 million is enough to make it to production, and I think that may be an underestimation. Now, I don't know anything about manufacturing myself, but this is true. Tesla took $10 billion to get stable with delivery of the Model S. Rivian went through like 3 or 4 billion before they made it to production. Lucid went through several billion. Now, those are full-fledged cars, and they have a lot more regulatory hurdles they need to pass through. Um, and because Aptera is an auto cycle, it may be less. Like I don't know exactly the number, but definitely Electromeccanica Solo and Archimoto did not go through billions of dollars or even hundreds of millions of dollars to make it to production. So Aptera has definitely a different road for that. So it's not like they need a lot more money, like in the billions, but they're going to need 50 million at a minimum and maybe closer to more than that. So this is probably Aptera's greatest hurdle. It's not a technical hurdle. It's not a um, it's not a product category hurdle. I think there's plenty of interest. People are willing to buy a three-wheeled car that's very efficient. There's plenty of interest. It's like, can they get the capital in this market where capital is very tight, the economy is not doing well, investors are very leery, and EV stocks have done very, very poorly. And as we know, Solo, Archimoto, they're having problems. And so it's going to be very difficult to find this funding. And so this is probably the best point he has. Okay, now he's talking about the other things, which is true. Archimoto is not doing well. Solo probably is not going to survive. But I think those are far inferior vehicles to Aptera. And it's not a it's not a good comparison. And then he goes on about how solar panels are dumb on the thing. And now, you know, he has a point there. Like back when Elon Musk was asked about solar panels, he said that, the least efficient place to put solar is on a car. And that's true because of the reasons that this guy says and Elon Musk said, and are patently obvious to anyone who thinks about it. I mean, cars are not always angled the right way to the sun. They are often put under shade, parked under shade, and a lot of times they're parked inside um, or next to buildings that shade them out. So, um, depending if you compare solar panels on a car to solar panels on a solar panel on a roof is definitely going to outperform solar panels on a car. However, solar panels on a car are really convenient, and they they make it so that you can essentially make a car that you don't have to plug in for most people, especially if you make a car that's very efficient. And that has opened up a different product category for a lot of people are interested in. Now, I do think that it's a gamble that the Aptera founders made to pursue this. Like, I think the main good point of an Aptera is its high efficiency, and they could have just come out with a very efficient composite vehicle with an electric drivetrain and maybe not spent so much time developing it and sold it and it would have done very well. And maybe they should have added the solar later. I don't know how much money they have spent developing the solar for the Aptera. We know that they have a whole production process that they developed, and I talked to one of the engineers that was doing the software for how to gate it, the different areas, so that when one part of the solar panels are shaded, it still makes some energy. And so they've spent quite a bit of engineering overhead and money developing this solar, and did developing that solar um, open up enough extra market to make that worth it? I don't know. I just don't have the information to give a reasonable assessment of that. But solar panels on a car, it's not the most efficient place to put them, but it is a very convenient place to put them. And with solar panel costs coming down and with efficiency going up, it's starting to make sense. And that's why Aptera is not the only one doing it, and it's probably going to show up. And in fact, Elon Musk has changed his mind, and he is adding solar to the Cybertruck. That is going to be an option. Um, so Elon Musk has come around and decided that solar makes sense. So, this guy can go argue with Elon Musk and tell him that he thinks that that's a completely stupid idea as well. And then don't breathlessly reword press releases. Okay, I'm going to agree with that. Like, don't go ahead and do that if you're a reasonable journalist, I guess. Um, you should probably be that. Like, if you're a fan channel, sure, do it. Like, that's what I do. But we're just fans, and we just like to talk about it. It's interesting to us, and we like to talk about it, and we like to kind of pour over all the press releases and any tidbit of information. It's kind of like a hobby, and that's not a bad thing. And then, okay, yeah. So he's just like, if you're blogging out from because you're a credulous enthusiast or hopeful investor, or writing clearly, don't expect to be taken seriously. Okay, yeah. Well, I don't care if this guy takes me seriously, and I don't think any of us care if he takes us seriously. His major points that I think were good is that yes, solar panels on a car are not the most efficient place, but in my opinion, they're a very convenient place, and that Aptera has a long road to uh, raise the money needed to get to production, and we know that is the number one issue here. Everything else in here is kind of like a very smug and snarky, uh, dismissive screed about something that he just doesn't seem to like for whatever reason. And then his history of the founders is just wrong. I mean, he misspells their name and also does not understand the history of the companies and doesn't know exactly what happened. He should go watch my video, Brief History of Aptera. There you go. Help yourself out and educate yourself. Okay, well, tell me what you guys think of this article. I'm sure a lot of you guys read it. And let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Thanks to our supporting members. Have a great day.